Bom dia. Bom dia, meu irmão. Bem melhor. É grande prazer estar aqui. Eu sempre venho ao Brasil de férias, a São Paulo, para visitar meu irmão, que mora lá. Hoje, estou aqui no Rio a trabalho. Normalmente é o contrário. Os gringos se divertem em Rio e trabalham em São Paulo. Mas na minha vida, muitas coisas são ao contrário. E hoje não é diferente. As pessoas pensam que o mais importante é vender. O mais importante é vender. Isso não é verdade. Eu acho que o mais importante é comprar. E por causa disto, estou muito feliz por estar no Rio falando para profissionais de Compras. And with that, I think I better change to English. Because as you learned, I mean, my Portuguese is all about férias. So I can talk about beber cerveja, caipirinha, vamos para a praia, uma lunar, vamos dançar, vamos para um concerto de Ivete Sangalo, all these things. But it's not about purchasing. And actually, the only words I know about purchasing are words we're going to see you shouldn't use anymore as a very good professional buyer when it comes to globalization and innovation. And these are the words like, quanto custo é? Esse é demais caro. Qual é a sua última proposta? Pode me mostrar outro mais barato? So these are the words we're not going to use in globalization, and we're not going to use in particular when we look for innovation. So let's see if I can manage the technology here. No, I can't, okay. Globalization. If you go on the street, if you ask 5 people here in Rio de Janeiro what they think about globalization, you probably will find 5, 6, 7 answers. If you go to Switzerland or Germany, you will find, if you ask 5 people, 6, 7 answers, and they will be different to the answers you get here in Brazil. So in total, you're going to have 14, 15 different answers. And when you also ask them what it means for you personally, what it means for your country, for your company, you will get different answers. And let's sort this out today a little bit. So what does globalization mean, or what is the true measurements for the globalization? If you look at these numbers on the left side, if you look at 1990, this is just 10 years ago, the majority of wealth, the majority of gross domestic product was in the developed countries. And I'm not talking about the tiny little number of people that lived in developed countries and the huge amount of people that just economy. And just in another 20 years, we will not talk anymore about emerging countries. They are there. And actually, that's what you see on the right side. And I think being in Rio, I can get rid of this jacket, I guess. So what you see in 20 years from now, Brazil will have overtaken France, UK, Germany. I'm pretty certain about this. If I look at this wonderful country, if I look at the people that work here, I truly believe that you will overtake the other guys. I'm not so sure about Russia, but it's my personal belief. So we see big fundamental shifts. And let's look into what are the drivers for that. So we see 3 main drivers, and we all basically know them, but it's good to recapture it and think about these drivers again. And the first driver is economic openness. I mean, in the end of the 80s, beginning of the 90s, India and China joined the world economies. Before, India was like a socialist derogation, and China was, I don't know what they did. But with the end of 80s and 90s, out of sudden, almost the working population that joined the world economy is almost doubled. And if you think about this effect that it had to the companies and the people in Europe and the US, I mean, it's horrible. I mean, they're losing jobs. All the manufacturing goes to China, all the services go to India, and to all the other countries. It's horrible. So that is why if you ask 5 people in Europe what they think about globalization, they might say, oh, it's not a good thing. Now, I truly believe it's a good thing because for the people in India, in Brazil, in China, it is a good thing. And how was this supported? I mean, it's supported by the internet. That's how you can move services to Argentina, to Manila, to India. It's supported by the invention of the container. So you have global supply chains. The container invented in 1950 and really picked up in the 70s, 80s. It's amazing what you can do today. And of course, when you look at the business function, disaggregation of business function. You might have HR in Argentina, you might have R&D in the Silicon Valley, you might have manufacturing in Korea, and you might have your customers all around the world. And last but not least, that's the size and the reach of the multinational. I mean, there are companies out there that really do that. They leverage their scale. They go wherever the talent is, they go wherever innovation is, they go wherever they find the best market. I said I'm going to show you how we think that globalization can be sliced and diced. And we use 5 dimensions to show that globalization is not about losing jobs. It's not about all manufacturing going to low-cost countries. Globalization is about emerging consumers. I mean, all these people that have been added to the world economies, all the emerging middle class, these are customers or potential customers. And we're going to see this in a minute, how this evolved. And then the war for talent. You will also see in a minute that the scarcest resource we have here in Brazil, we have all over the world, is good people. It's talent. Then the flow of capital. Amazing what has happened. Amazing if you look at foreign direct investments. Amazing when you look where Brazil invests. Or if you look who invests in Brazil. I mean, this year, China is the biggest foreign direct investor in Brazil. So it's not just the US investing all over the world and the Saudis with their petrol money buying Mercedes. No, it's not. It is cross-emerging markets investments. And the capital is a free flow capital. You can do it. Yes, now we have a bit of credit crunch. Yes, now the governments try to devalue all of their currencies or making sure they stay competitive. But the access to capital and your right to invest in a foreign country and the security you have that it's not going to be taken away has increased dramatically. Then the battle for resources and sustainability. I mean, we've heard from Cassie what this means. And we've learned in the 70s and 80s that resources are endless. And if we just use them, if we just put the oil out of the ground and we just burn it, we are going to destroy our planet. And then the new map of innovation. And that is part of what we discussed today. What does it mean? Innovation is not just the engineering in Stuttgart, where they build a nice Mercedes or the Porsche. No, actually what they do is they have their engineers all over the world. And that's something we're going to discuss in a minute. And by the way, I think I have plenty of time. So if you have any questions, please ask them now. You can ask them in Portuguese. I try to understand. You can ask them in English, whatever you want. And I never get this right. Okay, now this type of presentation I typically give in Europe, in France, UK, Germany, to the companies in these countries. And I try to explain to them what it means, just to open their minds what globalization means. Now today, it's a great pleasure for me to look into what it means for emerging market multinationals, like Petrobras, Vale, like companies like Embraer that I really appreciate, and I will come back to this in a minute. So what do these 5 dimensions mean for the emerging market multinationals? And what does it mean for the developed market multinationals. And what does it mean if you don't want to become global? What if you want to stay here and defend your market against those guys? So again, what has happened? If you look at the Global 500, if you look at the Global 500 in 1995, so this is just 15 years ago, out of 500 biggest companies in the world, 20 were from emerging markets. And today, it's 95. Amazing, isn't it? And it's not just from China. Yes, China has a big chunk, but they're from all over the world. And it's not just resources. It's not just metals and mining. It's high tech, it's communication, it's transportation. So it's all types of industries you find in the new entries in the world economy. So, emerging market multinationals. Who are they? I mean, this is more, you know better than I do, but the companies in France and UK, they want to know. Who are those guys? And what is driving their growth? So why are they going abroad? Why do they become global? And how are they doing it? How do they become bigger? How do they expand? And how are they navigating these 5 dimensions we just mentioned? And, of course, what are the challenges? And we're going to answer these questions. And we did some survey to explain the companies in North America and in Europe. So who are the guys? And probably, I mean, you know those guys better than I do. So we talked to the people, we asked them, talked to senior executives of these companies, and tried to find out the secret source for their expansion and for their success. And then we tried to map it to the 5 dimensions of the multipolar world or globalization. Oops, no, this was too fast. Okay, let's look at the expansion. If you look at the numbers, and unfortunately it might be a bit fine print, small to read. So what this means here, that is the reserves, the foreign exchange reserves, the dollars the Bank of China has in their pocket. And if you look at the graph, and you might think, oh, there was a crisis. 2008, I can't see any crisis. There was a crisis still in 2009, I can't see a crisis. If you say, oh, in 2010, it flattened, then it's because you can't read the fine print. The fine print reads this up to June 2010. So this year, it will even double. So for all depreciation or lower value of the US dollar, for exporting what Barack Obama would like to do, I can't see that. It's not there. Okay, so what are the enablers? Of course, it's liberalization. We had this already. Of course, it's the greater access to the overseas markets. We had that. And it's the finance that's available. So these are the 3 biggest enablers for the emerging market multinationals. And what are the drivers? It's the new markets. There are new customers out there. Then they wanna get to these new customers. They want to have efficiency gains, of course. Then they want to move up the value chain. Yeah, I mean, I talked about the direct investments China does here. I mean, one of the biggest investors I learned is the State Grid Corporation of China. What are they doing? I mean, they run electricity grids in China. They have 1.5 million employees. Now, they moved into, let's look how we can go abroad. And they could say, maybe I'm going to sell cables, maybe I'm going to sell transformers. That's not what they want to do. They want to build the transformers and the cables in China. They want to ship it here. They want to run all the electricity net, and they want to operate it, and of course they want to make money. And they know how to do it. 4th point is securing inputs. We already had it. I mean, resources are endless. And sometimes it's important that you go into different markets just to make sure that you get raw materials. Okay, so particularly important for procurement professionals. And then last but not least, sometimes it's just about ego. You know, I don't want to be the guy in this one country. I want to be global. Okay, let's face it. So sometimes these interviews are quite quite interesting. So, okay, now let's look into how these 5 dimensions, how they are managed by the emerging market multinationals. So it's the capital, it's the talent, it's the resources, how do they get to new consumers, and how do they tap into innovation. So we're going to discuss all of these 5 dimensions. If you look at the graph over here, and I'll try technology again. Yeah, if you look at the works, good. If you look at the technology at the numbers over there, the foreign direct investments, and now this is a subset of foreign direct investment. That is the cross-border merger and acquisition deals, where the purchaser is from an emerging market. Okay, so I mean numbers went down a bit because of the crisis we saw. But even in a very, very bad year, I mean, this is much bigger than it used 10 years ago. And I'm sure this will continue. You will see that. And if you look at the reasons why you want to do it, I mean, you want to just surpass your competitors. Yeah? You want to buy assets you don't have. You want to buy knowledge you don't have. You want to buy capabilities you don't have. And you want to buy expertise in the different markets. Now what you see here is, and we're going to do this for all 5 dimensions, you see a few bullet points, what this means for the emerging market multinationals and what it means for the old guys, for the guys in the developed markets. And this is a bit generic, so usually we would now go into a discussion, what would this mean for you personally, okay? But in general, it's a good guideline. So what does it mean? Yeah, the new entries, the new guys, they need to think smart about where to invest, but don't just invest in the old countries, invest in the new countries, and maybe you're going to invest in Mozambique pretty soon. I mean, Lula is traveling there, probably for a good reason, so maybe you're going to see direct investments in a few years in Mozambique. And then, of course, you need to learn about these global organizations and operations. That is a bit a tricky thing, because most probably you're used to being local. Not all of you here, because some of you already mastered perfectly globalization, but it's a challenge. And then, that is a tricky thing, you need to play on the political piano, because otherwise there will be protectionist backlash. I mean, that is what you see in the US, that is happening, and I could easily imagine that this can also happen in Europe if you're not managing to explain and do the public relations right. What does it mean for the old guys? Yes, there's more competition, but there's also greater opportunity for collaboration, because maybe you don't just need to buy, maybe you can collaborate. And you need to come up with a differentiated, really differentiated and leaner business models. Okay, interesting. I talked about the talent, and the paradox is, we said there's new consumers, a hell of a lot of new consumers, and you're going to see this in a minute. But when it comes to the workforce, when it comes to the people that are added to the global workforce, we see a tremendous shift. I mean, you're still in a very good position. So what does it mean here? So this means between 2005 and 2015, in Brazil, we will have an increase in workforce of around 20 million. Yeah? The next decade, 2015 to 2025, it's already reduced to around 15 million. Yeah? So even in Brazil, the country of the future, the workforce you have, the labor that is available is not endless. It's going to shrink. And if you look at the biggest economy when it comes to adding people, even in China and in India, it's going to be reduced, and this is only 2015 to 2025. If you look at 2025 to 2035 and so on, it's going to go down. And if you look at China, we're already there. So in 2015 to 2025, the working population is going to shrink. Actually, either this year, next year, or in 2 years, it will happen. Nobody knows. That's why the Chinese try to count their people. So they employed, I think, 4 million people, trained them to go out and count the others. Okay, big exercise. They will not be successful because they have really strict rules on where you can work, where you can stay. And now somebody's knocking at your door. Hello, I'm from the government. I want to know what you're doing here, how many people live here, and the people that are allowed to be here, they will not open the door. So it will be tricky. But one thing is for sure, the working population is going to shrink. If you think about the biggest present that has happened in the last 30 years when it comes to sustainability, when it comes to pollution, it is the one-child policy in China. That will make the biggest difference to all the sustainability. But what does it also mean in the, when it comes to producing things? And we will come to this also in a minute when it comes to US purchasing professionals. If you think about where you can get value from, there are three areas. I mean, one is labor, cheap labor, okay? Now this comes to an end. We're not going to see a big increase in labor anymore. Then the access to capital. There is enough money around there. They just don't know where to invest. That's why they do all the crazy gambling. Yeah? So if you have a good idea, chances are very high that you will get access to money. Okay? And then it's the resources. I mean, it's land, it's air, it's minerals. But we already said this will come to an end. So the only value you can get is from productivity increases, and productivity increases, they come from innovation. Yeah, so that is why innovation is so important, and that is why you need to get the right people that will drive the innovation. Okay, and with that, I mean, you already know, we need to make sure we get the right people on board, we get the right brand to employ people. An example I found very interesting is if you go to India, you see big advertisements of Accenture. And then you think, oh, are we doing a lot of business there? No, we are not. We're doing a tiny little bit. But the advertisement is to keep people, to attract and keep the workforce. It's not for selling. You first might think, but that is not the case. So you need to build a brand. I mean, it says for the emerging markets, but that's also important, of course, for the bigger brands. And what do the developed markets need to do? Exactly the same thing. I mean, they need to compete for the best talent globally, and they need to be able to tap in the emerging market talent. I mean, I'm in a hotel here in the Sheraton, and they have a conference there from HP. And there are people from all over the world being trained, brought together, and taught about the way HP lives and delivers value to their customers. And bringing those guys together and making sure you keep them, that is a tremendous task, but you need to be a master in that. And then managing the squeeze. I mean, we already heard about this. I mean, resources are endless, and if you just burn them up, they're not there anymore, number one, and number two, we're going to pollute our planet. So you need to invest in where you get the resources, or you could just leapfrog and say, you know what, maybe I'm not investing in how can I dig deeper in the ground and get more coal out of the ground. Maybe I just jump ahead and say, maybe I don't need to use it. If you look at the car industry and the fundamental shift they have now with the electric car, I'm a bit surprised that I don't see more new entrants. Because if you have a shift like this, I mean, the utilities, the power companies, the guys that produce batteries, it would be a good opportunity for them to enter. And yes, we've seen them. We have seen some of those companies, and now the question is for the big ones, are you going to buy the Teslas and those guys? Okay, and that is what we already have covered almost. That is the new population when it comes to markets. Yes, the working population is going to shrink, but the people that have money in their pocket to spend on products and services, they're increasing. And just for an example, what you see here on the right-hand side, the amazing shift. I mean, let's just focus on the middle class, and I know there are different definitions of middle class. Middle class in UK is something different than in the US, so there is some definition. If you have a $5,000, $10,000 of disposable income, okay, so money you can spend. Okay, how does this change in China? We've seen just 13 years ago, 10 million people being called middle class. We have 52 million in 2007, and an astonishing 130 million just in a few years from now. So that's what I call opportunity. And this is not just China. It's the same thing in Brazil. It's the same thing in India. It's the same thing all over the world. And that is why I say globalization is a really, really, really good thing for all of us if we do it right. Okay, so what do we need to do? Yes, we need to diversify our portfolio. We need to make sure we are specific to the different countries and the needs in different countries. And Procter & Gamble is so fantastic, or Cadbury's. I mean, or Nestle is also very good. I mean, the products they sell in different countries, the packaging might look the same besides the language, but what's in there is different. It's adapted to the local taste and to the local needs. And that is what the masters, or the emerging market guys and the developed guys, they need to master. So yeah, what are the implications? Of course, it's capitalize on what you know already. Yeah? So the emerging guys, they are much better in understanding that Brazil is not Germany. Okay? There are differences. There is not a one-size-fits-all. The different mentalities. Or for the Indian companies, what they are doing, I mean, they say, I don't have that much money to invest. I don't have all the capital to do. We need to get much smarter on how we engineer things. Let's not find a perfect solution, but let's find a good solution that works. So just forget about all the gadgets and the stuff you don't need and build a car for $2,500. And I mean, I've been in the car industry for some time,